The galaxy awoke to silence. Not the natural hush of interstellar void, but a deliberate absence, a missing heartbeat that left every empire uneasy. Human colonies stood abandoned, their cities intact yet eerily empty, lights extinguished, doors left ajar as though their inhabitants had stepped out for a moment and never returned. Vast armadas of human ships drifted in graveyard orbits, lined in immaculate formations as if their crews had synchronized their departure. There were no bodies, no transmissions, no war. Humanity had simply vanished in a single, impossible breath. Grand Chancellor Xyrol sat in a spire of glass and metal, mandibles twitching as he studied the reports streaming in from across the sectors. His compound eyes scanned endless communiques, human outposts lifeless, trade hubs deserted, embassies unmanned. He had negotiated with humans often, wary of their blunt manner and unpredictable strategies. Now, he could not decide if he felt relief or dread. The galaxy had lost its most volatile species, and with them the delicate balance they had enforced with sheer presence. For every empire that sighed at the reprieve, another whispered in fear. If humans could vanish by choice, what had they seen that the rest had not? General Vecna of the Drakthar war clans stared at a hologram of Earth's old flag, his scaled fists curling into claws. He remembered well the campaigns against human colonies, how his legions had descended on fragile settlements only to be met by defenders who refused surrender, even when defeat was certain. He had underestimated them once, and still bore the scars. To him, humans had been a paradox, soft-blooded, frail, and yet capable of ferocity beyond comprehension. Their departure unsettled him because it robbed him of an enemy who had shaped his life more than allies or rivals ever had. Without them, his victories tasted like ash. Archivist Thalen, feathers dull in the lamplight of his archive chamber, sifted through fragments of human literature. He was a scholar who prized understanding above conquest, and in humans he had found endless fascination. Their stories were filled with struggle, defiance, and death, themes other species shunned yet humans embraced. Thalen's claws traced the edges of a worn book, an artifact given to him by a human diplomat long ago. In their art and philosophy, he saw no fear of mortality, but an embrace of it, a conviction that endings gave meaning to beginnings. Their absence was not merely political or economic loss. It was the silencing of a voice the galaxy had barely begun to hear. Across the stars, panic brewed. Some factions urged seizing abandoned human systems, scavenging their technology, and claiming fertile worlds. Others warned against such folly, remembering humanity's reputation for retaliation. Rumors circulated of human traps laid for the greedy, dormant weapons waiting to unleash devastation on trespassers. No one could be certain whether these stories were truth or paranoia, but the galaxy hesitated, restrained by fear of an unseen consequence. Xyrol convened an emergency council of allies and rivals alike, his voice sharp with frustration. We cannot treat this as coincidence. A species does not vanish without reason. The humans planned this, and I do not believe they planned it for our benefit. His words carried weight, yet his audience murmured with disbelief, denial, and opportunism. Vecna, attending via projection, sneered openly. They were reckless, not gods. If they are gone, it is because they burned themselves out. Their ruins are ours to take. Thalen, invited as an observer, leaned forward, feathers bristling. You mistake them. Humans did nothing by accident. Their chaos was always a mask for precision. Look at their departure, every system evacuated in unison, every ship positioned as though choreographed. This was not collapse. This was decision. The chamber stilled, each delegate struck by the weight of that suggestion. If humans had chosen to leave, the question was not how but why. Whispers spread through the ranks. Some spoke of ascension, others of exile, still others of a threat lurking beyond the galactic rim. The uncertainty gnawed at them more fiercely than any open war could. On distant worlds, scavengers already ventured into silent human stations. They reported eerie signs, messages carved into bulkheads in languages long dead, data cores encrypted with unbreakable codes, and in one case, a mural painted across a city wall depicting stars that no known chart could identify. These fragments only deepened the mystery, hinting at a plan far greater than the galaxy could grasp. For Zyrol, the silence was intolerable. He had built his career on balancing chaos, and now the absence of humanity left him directionless. For Vecna, the silence was insulting, robbing him of worthy foes and daring him to defy their memory. For Thalen, it was sorrowful, the extinguishing of a culture whose echoes might never return. And for the galaxy, it was dangerous, for in the void left behind, rivalries long suppressed began to stir once more. As the council broke apart in discord, each delegate clung to their own interpretation. But deep in the stillness between stars, the truth lingered, unspoken yet felt by all. Humanity's departure was not an ending. It was a beginning whose meaning had yet to be revealed. And though no one could yet name it, the galaxy had begun to learn the shape of fear. You said. General Vecna remembered the first time his legions clashed with humanity. He had commanded an overwhelming force, ships bristling with weapons, armies bred for conquest. His advisors told him the colony they targeted was weak, its defenses outdated, its soldiers few. Yet when the Drakthar banners descended upon the settlement, the humans did not cower. They fought with a savagery unlike anything he had witnessed. Farmers wielded tools as weapons, engineers repurposed machinery into engines of destruction, and even when defeat was certain, they fought on as if survival was less important than defiance itself. Vecna had won the ground, but not the war within himself. Scars from human blades lined his scales, and deeper still, scars from human resolve cut into his pride. He could not forget their eyes, burning with a fire that made no sense to him, eyes of prey that had decided to hunt the predator. Archivist Thalen carried his own collection of memories, though his were not forged in battle, but in words and symbols. He had spent decades unraveling human culture, fascinated by their contradictory nature. In his archives, shelves bent under the weight of human literature, poetry, philosophy, and chronicles of war. He often recited fragments aloud to himself, tasting the sharpness of their thoughts. There was one passage he could never shake, a phrase etched into his mind like stone. Better to die on our feet than live on our knees. To Thalen, that was humanity distilled, creatures who found nobility in suffering and dignity in defiance. Where other species sought survival above all, humans dared to gamble survival for meaning. Their art reveled in tragedy, their histories glorified struggle, and their myths praised sacrifice. Now that they were gone, Thalen felt as though the galaxy had lost a voice unlike any other, one that spoke of truths the rest feared to acknowledge. Chancellor Zyrol's memories were colder, shaped in negotiation chambers rather than on battlefields or among archives. He recalled human diplomats, men who carried themselves with confidence that seemed absurd when measured against the fragility of their bodies and the youth of their civilization. They bargained fiercely, not with the caution of the weak, but with the certainty of equals. Zyrol remembered a moment when a treaty nearly collapsed. His aides had whispered to exploit human desperation, to force concessions. Yet the human envoy had smiled, as if amused by the threat of collapse. "Then we will endure without you," the man had said, and Zyrol had believed him. Against logic, against strategy, he had believed him. It was that unshakable certainty that unsettled him most. Humans never truly seemed afraid of loss, and that made them difficult to control. Their disappearance, Zyrol suspected, was not a failure, but the same sort of gamble they had always made. As weeks stretched into months, the absence of humanity became more than a mystery. It became a wound. Trade networks faltered where humans had been the mediators. Wars flared in regions where their presence had deterred conflict. And through it all, the three figures, Vecna, Thalen, and Zyrol, found their paths converging, not by design, but by inevitability. They were drawn to the same haunting question: what had humanity seen that made them abandon the galaxy? Vecna sought answers in wreckage, seizing derelict human vessels and scouring them for secrets. His warriors pried open sealed databanks, disassembled engines, and studied weapons. Yet what they found unsettled him more than it empowered him. Systems shut down at his touch, defenses activated against unauthorized users, and in one case, a dormant warship broadcast a single chilling statement before self-destructing. "We are not gone. You are being watched." He silenced the incident from his subordinates, but the words clawed at his thoughts. Phelan's search took a different form. He journeyed to a deserted human archive world, where libraries the size of cities stood untouched. Dust coated the terminals, yet the servers hummed with silent purpose, as if waiting for a command that would never come. In one chamber, he uncovered a series of star charts unlike any he had studied. They mapped regions beyond the galactic rim into uncharted voids where no empire had ever dared to go. The charts were not speculative. They were meticulous, filled with annotations in dozens of human languages. Phelan traced the routes with trembling claws, realizing they were not random wanderings. They were plans, coordinated and deliberate. Humanity had not fled blindly. They had departed with direction. Meanwhile, Xyral wrestled with politics. The council fractured daily, some voices demanding that humanity's abandoned worlds be claimed, others urging restraint. Xyral himself tried to maintain balance, but he could not silence his gnawing suspicion that humanity's departure was part of something larger. He intercepted fragments of encrypted human transmissions, patterns that seemed meaningless until he compared them to older communications. Then, with dawning horror, he realized they were not distress calls but countdowns, signals synchronized across countless systems. The final message had triggered at the exact moment of their vanishing. Each man, soldier, scholar, and statesman now carried a shard of the truth, though none yet saw the whole. Vecna feared the humans were not as absent as they seemed. Phelan suspected they had gone to confront something beyond imagination. Xyral understood their disappearance had been executed with a precision that no other species could have mustered. Together, their realizations formed the outline of a revelation that none dared speak aloud. The galaxy had always feared humanity's presence. Now, with every uncovered secret, it began to fear their absence even more. The thought grew, unbidden but relentless. Humanity had not left the galaxy behind. They had left the galaxy unprepared. And as each of the three men stared into the void left by their human counterparts, they felt a chill deeper than space itself, the sense that the true conflict had not yet begun. The fracture lines spread quickly. With humanity gone, the fragile equilibrium they had enforced disintegrated, leaving the galaxy to unravel under its own ambitions. Borders once held in check erupted into violence, fleets clashed in contested sectors, and old grudges resurfaced with newfound fury. It was into this chaos that three men, General Vecna, Archivist Phelan, and Chancellor Xyral, found themselves drawn, each carrying their own interpretation of the mystery, each forced to decide what role they would play in a galaxy teetering on the edge. Vecna, hardened by a lifetime of conquest, had no patience for scholars' whispers or politicians' caution. To him, power was taken, not gifted, and the ruins of humanity offered opportunities unmatched in history. He stood on the bridge of a captured human battleship, its dark hull glimmering with alloys unknown to his engineers. Systems blinked and pulsed around him, half understood, half defiant of his attempts to tame them. The AI's warning, "You are being watched," still echoed in his memory, though he buried it beneath layers of bravado. "If the humans are gone," he told his subordinates, "then their weapons belong to the strong. And the strong are us." Yet in private, when the corridors of the vessel seemed too quiet, he wondered whether the ship itself judged him, waiting for some unseen master's return. Phelan approached the mystery from the opposite end, wandering through the dust-shrouded halls of human archives where silence pressed down like a weight. Each discovery deepened his unease. The star charts he had uncovered showed routes into the dark void beyond the rim, routes drawn not as speculation but as certainty. He had compared them against ancient Zevran records and even fragments of forgotten Drakther legends, and in every case, there were faint alignments, hints of something older than any of their empires. Humanity had left deliberately, but they had not fled. They had marched toward something. Thalen's claws tapped nervously on the console as he pieced together the fragments, unable to resist the gnawing thought. The humans had not vanished to escape the galaxy. They had departed to meet a foe it had never seen. Zyrol, meanwhile, fought his own battles within the council chambers, where alliances frayed and power shifted like sand in a storm. The Kothari Chancellor, long adept at manipulating rivals, found himself cornered by their desperation. Delegates shouted for human worlds to be claimed, for their technologies to be harnessed, for their empty colonies to be filled. Zyrol argued restraint, his mandibles clicking with agitation as he replayed in his mind the synchronized signals he had decoded. The humans had left nothing to chance. Every outpost, every shipyard, every colony had departed in the same instant. That precision was not the mark of a people extinguished, but of a people mobilized. He feared what would happen if their plans were disrupted, if arrogant scavengers triggered something meant to remain untouched. Yet his warnings fell on ears deafened by greed and fear. The three men met at last, not in person but through a secure channel arranged in secrecy. Their faces flickered across the transmission, each etched by shadows of unease. Vector dismissed Thalen's theories as the fantasies of an academic, yet his eyes betrayed his own doubts. Thalen, voice steady but feathers trembling, laid out the star maps and urged them to see what was obvious. Zyrol revealed the existence of the countdowns, a galactic clock that had struck zero on the day humanity vanished. Together, their fragments wove a single, undeniable picture. The humans had departed not as refugees, not as victims, but as soldiers embarking on a campaign beyond the stars. And if they return? Thalen asked quietly, his eyes glimmering with both fear and awe. They will return, Zyrol replied, his voice low. And when they do, they will ask what we did with what they left behind. Vector growled, claws scraping the edge of his chair. Then let them find strength, not cowardice. Let them see we claimed what they abandoned. But even as he spoke, the AI of the captured warship stirred, its systems flickering to life unbidden. Across the bridge, alien officers froze as the vessel broadcast a signal into the void. Vector's scales prickled as words appeared on the display, unauthorized access recorded. Transmitting coordinates. When we return, judgment will follow. Far away, Thalen unearthed another fragment of data from the archive world, a final human message buried deep beneath layers of encryption. His translator struggled, but the meaning emerged clearly enough. We depart not in fear, but in preparation. The galaxy is not our destiny. Guard yourselves, for what hunts us will not stop at the rim. Zyrol received both revelations within hours of each other, the AI's warning and Thalen's translation, and for the first time in his long career, he felt something close to despair. The humans had left the galaxy with a purpose greater than survival. They had gone to confront something vast, something that pursued them across the dark. Their disappearance was not abandonment. It was a shield raised against an approaching storm. The three men stood at a crossroads. Vector saw a chance to wield human weapons and carve a new empire. Thalen sought only to preserve knowledge before disaster swept it away. Zyrol strained to hold the council together, though he knew the galaxy was already unraveling. None of them could agree on a path forward, but each understood one truth with painful clarity: humanity's absence was not a reprieve. It was a warning, and their choices in the coming days would decide whether the galaxy survived long enough to understand what the humans had feared. As the transmission ended and silence returned, the stars themselves seemed to lean closer, as if waiting for the decision. And in that stillness, each of the three men realized that the true conflict was no longer about humanity's disappearance. It was about what their return would mean, and what would arrive chasing them. You said. The first signs arrived as whispers through the deep-range arrays, shadows moving at the galactic rim, distortions in gravitational fields, faint pulses of energy that no known engine could produce. At first the council dismissed them as anomalies, the random noise of the void. But then the patterns grew undeniable. Fleets were assembling beyond the stars, massive and disciplined, their movements too precise to be anything but human. General Vector stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the shifting tactical displays. His claws drummed against the console, restless, defiant. For weeks he had flaunted his captured human vessel, claiming it as a trophy, a symbol that he, not humanity, was the inheritor of their strength. But the moment the new signatures appeared, the vessel grew restless. Its systems flickered to life without command, its engines thrummed in anticipation, as though it recognized the approach of its true masters. Vector snarled, refusing to show fear before his officers. Yet inside, he felt a familiar weight pressing down, memories of blood-soaked fields and human eyes unbroken even in defeat. Now those eyes were returning, multiplied across the void. Archivist Thalen received the reports in his quiet chamber, feathers trembling as he read each line. He had expected this, had even longed for it in secret, but the reality struck harder than he imagined. The star maps he had uncovered were no riddle. Humanity had charted their exodus with the precision of a military campaign, and now they were marching home. But what seized Thalen's heart was not the thought of humanity's return alone. It was what followed in their wake. His instruments detected disturbances larger than the fleets themselves, shapes vast enough to blot out the stars, their signatures alien to every database he possessed. Humanity was not fleeing. They were leading something toward them, something vast and unrelenting. For the first time, Thalen truly understood the meaning of the words he had translated. What hunts us will not stop at the rim. Chancellor Zyrol faced the council as panic erupted in waves. Delegates shrieked accusations, demanded preemptive strikes, begged for negotiations. Zyrol silenced them with a rare burst of fury, his mandibles snapping in anger. Fools! Do you not see? This was never about seizing their worlds or their weapons. Humanity has returned not as conquerors, not as deserters, but as warriors facing a storm none of us could endure alone. He did not tell them of the final message he had intercepted, for he knew the truth would only drive them deeper into despair. Instead, he pressed the council to prepare defenses, to unite before the darkness overtook them all. Yet in his own mind, he could not escape the truth. The humans had chosen to leave them behind because they had not trusted the galaxy to stand beside them. The first transmission arrived soon after, carried across every channel, simple and unmistakable. A human voice, deep and steady, spoke words that froze even Vector's heart. We walked among you to learn. We departed to prepare. Fear not our absence. Fear what follows us. The transmission ended, leaving silence heavier than any bombardment. There were no threats, no declarations of war, only the certainty that humanity was facing something beyond comprehension, and that the galaxy's fate hung in the balance. Vector's pride shattered then. He had thought himself bold, daring to seize human technology and claim it as spoils. Now he realized the truth. His theft had not made him stronger. It had marked him for judgment. The warship he commanded responded to the transmission by locking its systems, ignoring his orders, its weapons priming not for him but for the unseen enemy beyond the rim. He stared at the flickering displays, scales prickling, and for the first time admitted silently that he was afraid. Thalen watched as the disturbances grew clearer. Through long-range visuals, shapes emerged from the void, colossal forms of unnatural geometry, vessels or creatures he could not tell. They dwarfed the human fleets, their presence oppressive, suffocating. Yet the humans did not falter. Their armadas formed disciplined lines, engines flaring, weapons ready. They did not turn inward toward the galaxy. They faced outward, positioning themselves as a bulwark against the storm. Thalen felt tears blur his vision, not of grief, but of awe. Humanity had not abandoned them. Humanity had left to become a shield, and now they returned to stand between the galaxy and annihilation. In the council chamber, Zyrol stood alone against chaos. Delegates screamed of retreat, of surrender, of appeasement. But Zyrol, who had once feared the humans' unpredictability, now understood their strength. They had always been willing to risk everything for meaning greater than survival. He turned from the council, disgusted by their cowardice, and whispered to himself words he had once heard from a human envoy. "Then we will endure without you." The galaxy trembled as the first shots were fired, not against its empires, but into the endless dark. Human fleets unleashed storms of energy, illuminating the void, striking at the advancing titans that pursued them. The scale of the conflict dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever imagined. And as the shockwaves rippled outward, every empire understood the truth. Humanity had not been the threat. Humanity had been the warning. Vecna, Thalen, and Xyral each stood in silence, watching the horizon of history shift before their eyes. For the general, it was the collapse of arrogance into reluctant respect. For the scholar, it was the vindication of every whispered theory, tempered by the terror of being correct. For the chancellor, it was the bitter realization that politics could no longer shape destiny. Humanity had seized that mantle, and the galaxy could only follow. The battle raged beyond the rim, yet its echoes reached every heart. The humans fought not for dominion, not for survival alone, but to hold back a darkness too vast for others to comprehend. And in that moment, the galaxy finally understood the depth of its fear, not of humans themselves, but of what their fear revealed. If humanity, with all its fire and defiance, trembled before what lay beyond, then there was no safety for anyone. The last images transmitted before the feeds went silent showed the human fleets advancing, weapons blazing, their silhouettes burning against the backdrop of an endless storm. They did not look back toward the galaxy. They faced the void, unflinching, as though daring it to break them. And in that defiance, every watching species saw the truth. The day humanity returned was not the end of fear. It was the beginning of dread everlasting.
You said,